Hi, welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Game of Thrones Season 4, Episode 7, Mockingbird. Overall, I think it was a fairly decent episode. Nothing spectacular, but it helped push the story forward in a very interesting way. There was a lot of great moments here, which I'll get to shortly. So, we start off the episode with Tyrion talking to Jaime, explaining his motivations. Now, I heard some theories last week that Tyrion had planned all along to have Oberyn fight for him in a trial by combat, but I had thought it was more of a spur of a moment type thing, and it turns out that was the case. He didn't really think that far ahead, and also Tyrion confirms what I suspected, that he mainly did it to spite his father, because he knew his father had planned for him to take the deal in order to get Jaime to carry on the Lannister family name. And Tyrion's main motivation was to fuck up his father's plans. And in fact, we see at one point Tyrion's convinced that he's going to die because of what he did. But in the moment, his life wasn't as important to him as defying his father. So he first plans to use Jaime, who turns him down because he's not a good fighter anymore, and then Bronn, who apparently has been bought out. Now here's the thing about Bronn. I've heard a lot of speculation online that Bronn is responsible for Shae testifying at Tyrion's trial. Because last time we saw Shae, Bronn was escorting her to the boat to leave King's Landing, and then he told Tyrion that she did leave. So a lot of people are speculating that he lied to Tyrion and was bought off by Cersei to deliver Shae to them. But I don't buy that for a second. I don't think Bronn had anything to do with Shae testifying. I think he honestly believed that she did get on the boat and leave. But the vague manner in which he replied to Tyrion when he asked if he actually saw her get on the boat and leave tells me that he didn't really take it that seriously, and he didn't actually make sure that she left. So I think it's much more likely that Bronn actually did believe that Shae left, but either the Lannisters got to her on the boat before it left, or she possibly smuggled herself back to King's Landing because she didn't want to leave, or perhaps her ship never left the harbor because all the ships were stopped when Joffrey died. And when they searched the ship for Sansa, they found Shae, who Tywin and Cersei were already searching for. Either way, I'm certain that Bronn had nothing to do with it. Because in this episode, although Bronn turns Tyrion down, he does show affection for him, and I don't think he would outright betray him like that. But he is all about looking out for number one, so he actually gives Tyrion a chance to buy him off, to give him a better deal, because in the end, he would rather work for Tyrion than his sister. But when Tyrion's unable to do so, he has to do what's best for him. And Tyrion understands that, and so I found that whole scene very touching. So I knew that Oberyn was going to fight for Tyrion in the trial by combat because of some spoilers and from reading the title of episode 8. But for some reason I thought that Tyrion would have to convince him. I didn't think it would be Oberyn's idea. And it's funny that Tyrion didn't even consider that Oberyn would fight for him because he is a Lannister after all, and Oberyn hates Lannisters. But this scene was so interesting because Oberyn tells the story about seeing him as a baby and how badly his family treated him, and that was in fact the first bad impression he had of the Lannisters, and it sort of informed his affinity he felt with Tyrion, and that he saw him as a victim of the Lannisters despite being a Lannister himself. Obviously his main goal is to kill the Mountain, but he could theoretically do that in other ways that wouldn't save Tyrion's life. But I think he sees this as a perfect opportunity to kill the Mountain and piss off the Lannisters at the same time. I also like how Oberyn revealed that he saw through Cersei's little plan to get him on her side. I liked how he described it as a feeble attempt that was beyond obvious of what she was doing. I wonder if Marjorie and Tywin were equally as perceptive. So then we got Arya and the Hound. Last time we saw them, I was disappointed and said something better happen next time we see them. Although nothing really happened, I did find their storyline much more interesting this time around. Although they still bitch at each other, they do seem to be more endearing to each other. And the Hound is acting sort of like a mentor figure to Arya, setting her up to kill that dude rather than doing it himself. And then the way he opened up to her about her brother, I'm sure he's never opened up to anyone like that before. It was good to see that, but I think something big's going to happen next time we see them. So we got several season 2 figures from Arya's storyline return in this episode. First, it was that murderer guy who was locked up in the cage with Jack and Hagar, who had threatened to kill Arya. I was really surprised to see him again. I didn't think I think his reappearance was kind of random. It seems like Arya is meeting up with all of the people who mistreated her in season 2 and killing them. But apparently, the dude who bit the mountain was also in season 2. I suppose he was the other guy in the cage with Jack and Hagar. And then, of course, the second figure in Arya's season 2 storyline to reappear in this episode is Hot Pie. It was cool to see him again, and the whole time I was wondering if he was mentioning Arya to Brienne. I was really glad that he did, because it puts a nice little spin to Brienne's storyline. In fact, this is the first time since Ned's death that we see a character we know and like learn of what happened to Arya. It was interesting how she pretty much wrote off Arya and was just looking for Sansa, but now she's looking for both. It would be good to see where it goes from here, although I must note I do agree with Podrick that it probably isn't very wise for Brienne to be shooting her mouth off like that, considering how badly Cersei wants Sansa dead. So next we see Daenerys get it on with Dario. I think this was a long time coming. The way that they did it was kind of interesting. If you watch my previous reviews, you notice I've been saying I think Daenerys should send some other people to Yunkai or Astapor to deal with the people who enslaved the freed slaves. In fact, I'm surprised she wasn't more concerned about it already, but glad to see she's finally doing something about it. It makes perfect sense to send Dario to deal with Yunkai. Still no talk of Astapor, but one step at a time, I guess. I'm not so sure it's a good idea to send that dude whose father was crucified as an ambassador. Doesn't seem like he would have Daenerys' well-being at heart, and seems like he'd be just as likely to help the masters of Yunkai resist Daenerys, but we'll see. It'll be interesting to see if we actually get scenes of Dario and Yunkai, or if we're just going to hear people talk about it. I'm very interested to see where Daenerys' storyline goes this season, because it doesn't seem like it's really building to anything when the end of the season's coming soon. So we also get a glimpse of Melisandre talking to Stannis' wife. I typically find any scene with Stannis' wife boring, but this was okay. What was most interesting to me is that they're leaving to join Stannis rather than Stannis coming back to Dragonstone. But they were purposely vague on where it was they were going. Still no mention of the Wall this season, but I have a feeling that that might be where they're headed. Although all the talk this season seems to indicate Stannis is going to try to retake King's Landing, I really don't think he's ready to try that again, because he has less people than he did in Season 2, and the Lannisters have more. So I think he still has some more building to do. So if they're heading there now, if they're heading anywhere now, I think it's the Wall. The fact that they haven't mentioned it this season makes me think it's meant to be a surprise, but if it was supposed to be that much of a surprise, they shouldn't have mentioned it in Season 3. So, we also got that scene at the Wall with Jon Snow being treated like shit by Sir Alistair Thorne. Although I can say, all I can say about this is I hope this guy dies, and I can't wait for him to die. He's such an idiot. It's not just that he's an asshole to Jon Snow all the time, but it's that he's an asshole to Jon Snow at the expense of what's best for the Night's Watch. And finally, we see Sansa and Littlefinger at the Eyrie. So I knew from some spoilers that I read that Littlefinger was going to kill Lysa Arryn, but I think even if I didn't know that, I would have guessed it from the last time we saw them. It's obvious he didn't care much for her and was just using her. But more than that, she was really unstable and unreliable. And has, Littlefinger already told Sansa he doesn't like working with unreliable allies. Now, there's been some speculation on whether he set Sansa up in a dangerous situation by kissing her in such an open place where it was obvious where Lysa could see them. I'm not so sure about that. I wouldn't put it past him because if he did, it would be a huge risk that Lysa might kill Sansa first. But on the other hand, it gave him the perfect excuse to kill Lysa while endearing himself to Sansa at the same time. What's also interesting here is that Littlefinger supposedly reveals his true motivations for killing Joffrey, and that was to get revenge for the death of Catelyn. There's been some speculation as to whether or not he can be believed. I, for one, think there's some truth to it, but I don't think it's his main motivation. He tries to claim here. I think his main motivation was so he could get Sansa. I think his plan all along was to marry her, which now that his wife has conveniently died, he's free to do so. If you remember, it was his plan ever since the end of Season 2 to get Sansa to run away with him, but Varys foiled those plans by having arranged for her to marry Sir Loras Tyrell. And then, then Littlefinger helped ruin those plans by telling Cersei, which eventually led to Sansa marrying Tyrion. So, framing Tyrion for Joffrey's death while at the same time conveniently whispering Sansa away was the perfect way to get Littlefinger what he wanted most, and that was Sansa. So I think this was his primary reason for killing Joffrey, but he couldn't out and out say this to Sansa, so he has to play up the whole Catelyn revenge thing. So yeah, overall pretty strong episode. Not one of the best, but certainly a strong point of the season. So next week, or should I say 2 weeks from now, the previews looks like we'll see Ramsay try to use Theon to take Catelyn. Will be interesting to see what happens, if the plan will work or not. Will be interesting to find out whether they take care of it in one episode or drag it out over several episodes. And then the preview seems to imply that Sansa will tell on Littlefinger, but I don't think she will. I think that's just a misdirection, and in the end, she'll stick up for him. But the trailer also gives the distinct impression that Gilly might be in serious danger, as they mention the wildlings attack Moletown, and then they show Sam crying. But I really hope she doesn't die. Sam's just such an idiot. And then, of course, the epic battle between the Mountain and Oberyn, which will really be cool to see. So I'm kind of upset I had to wait 2 whole weeks for the next episode. It's going to be kind of brutal. I mean, is it really necessary for them to skip Memorial Day? Because they showed an episode on Easter Sunday. But whatever. I decided I'm going to do several Game of Thrones videos next week to make up for the lack of episode. I'll probably review earlier seasons, so keep an eye out for that. And thanks for watching.